August 22nd, 1812. A young Swiss man walks through a narrow canyon in what is now southern Jordan. He is 27 years old. He is sweating in wool robes. He has told his Bedouin guide he wants to sacrifice a goat at the tomb of Aaron. This is a lie. His name is Johann Ludwig Burckhardt. He is traveling under a false name. He cannot stop. He cannot sketch. He cannot take notes. If they discover who he really is, they will kill him. He has been walking for nearly a kilometre. Walls of red sandstone rise on either side. They close above him like a door. And then the canyon ends. And he sees it. A building carved directly into the rock face, 40 meters tall, columns, a pediment, an urn, an entire temple facade cut from a single cliff. He knows immediately what he has found, a city that Europe has forgotten for 600 years. How does a civilization carve a capital into solid stone? And how does a small desert kingdom still stand when every empire around it has fallen? The building is called the Treasury. The city is called Petra. The people who built it are called the Nabataeans, and they were the quietest empire in the ancient world. They were Arabian nomads once, desert people with camels. By the 4th century before the Common Era, they had done something no other tribe had managed. They had learned the water. They knew where the rain fell. They knew where it ran. They knew how to catch it, how to store it, how to move it through pipes cut into stone. And because they knew the water, they controlled the trade. Frankincense from Yemen, myrrh from Ethiopia, silk from the East, black pepper from India, bitumen from the Dead Sea. Every caravan crossing the Arabian Peninsula had to stop for water, and the Nabataeans owned the wells. They charged a fee for every camel that passed. The fee was small. The volume was enormous. At the peak of the incense trade, 3,000 tons of frankincense moved north every year, most of it through Petra. The city grew wealthy the way cities always grow wealthy, by being impossible to avoid. They built their capital at the bottom of a sandstone basin. They did not build it up from the ground, they cut it into the cliffs. 30,000 people lived here at its peak, a city of tombs and temples and houses and gardens, all carved into living rock. And then, after 6 centuries, it was emptied. An earthquake broke the water system in the year 363 of the Common Era. The trade routes shifted to the sea. The city slowly emptied. By the time of the Crusades, Petra was gone from European memory, until the goat herd and the Swiss man and the August afternoon. But this documentary is not only about Petra, it is about the country that holds it, Jordan, a small kingdom of roughly 11 million people, smaller than Portugal, a country with almost no oil and almost no water, a country surrounded by Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the West Bank. In the last 60 years, Jordan has taken in more refugees per capita than almost any nation on earth. Palestinians in 1948, Palestinians again in 1967, Iraqis in 91, and again in 2003, Syrians since 2011. Roughly 1 in every 3 people now living in Jordan was not born in Jordan. And yet the country is quiet. The news does not come from here. How does a small country hold when louder places break? That is the question. The capital is called Amman. It is built on hills. Originally there were 7, now there are 19, depending on how you count, and the city spreads across 22. The hills have Arabic names: Jabal al-Kala, Jabal al-Luwebda, Jabal Amman. The valleys between them have Arabic names too. At the top of the oldest hill stands a ruin. It has been a ruin for a very long time. The place is called the Citadel. People have lived on this hill for 9,000 years. That is not a misprint. The first settlers arrived here in the Neolithic, before pottery, before writing, before the pyramids of Egypt. The Bronze Age fortified the hill in 1800 before the Common Era. Then came the Ammonites. The city's name in the Iron Age was Rabbath Ammon. It is where Amman gets its name. Then the Assyrians took it, then the Babylonians, then Alexander the Great's generals, then the Ptolemies of Egypt, then the Seleucids, then Rome. The Romans renamed it Philadelphia. They built a temple to Hercules at the top. A few columns still stand. A single stone hand remains, 5 fingers carved from white marble, broken off a colossal statue, resting on the earth like something that forgot its own arm. The statue was roughly 12 meters tall when it stood. The rest of it has never been found. The hand alone is nearly 2 meters across. Every Jordanian child who visits the citadel stops at it. They put their own hand beside it. The photograph comes out the same way every time. A small hand and a marble hand, and the same space between them. Then came the Byzantines. A church was built beside the Roman temple. Then came the Umayyad Caliphate in the 7th century. They built a palace next to the church, next to the temple, and then an earthquake. From the top of the citadel today, you can see the Roman theater at the base of the hill. 6,000 people could sit in it. You can see the downtown market, the calls to prayer rising and overlapping. You can see the hills spreading, pale yellow, every building faced in local limestone because the city requires it by law. Amman feels newer than it is. Most of the modern city was built in the last 100 years. In 1921, Transjordan had barely 400,000 people in the entire territory. Today, Greater Amman holds roughly 4 million. Palestinians, Iraqis, Syrians, Circassians, Armenians, Chechens, and the original tribal Jordanians who trace back to the tents. Walk through the downtown souks on a Friday morning. The stalls sell sumac and za'atar and pomegranate molasses. The bakeries pull ka'ak out of stone ovens. The coffee houses are full of older men playing cards and younger men staring at phones. The old and the new sit beside each other without resolving. This is the grammar of Jordan, layer on layer, without ever quite deciding which layer is the real one. An hour north of Amman, in a shallow valley, is a different kind of Roman city. It has been there the whole time. The city was called Jerash. The Arabic name now is Jerash. Alexander the Great's soldiers may have founded it, though the records disagree. The Roman general Pompey took it in 63, before the Common Era. The Emperor Hadrian wintered here in the year 129 of the Common Era. A great arch still stands where the emperor entered. Then you pass through the arch, and the city opens. An oval plaza, 80 meters wide, ringed with 56 Ionic columns, each column 8 meters tall. It is the only oval forum from the classical world that still stands. The paving stones are the same ones the Romans laid. Beyond it runs the Cardo Maximus, a colonnaded street half a kilometre long. The chariot ruts are still worn into the limestone. The Fountain House, the temples of Zeus and Artemis. The South Theatre, which held 5,000 people and still holds its acoustics. And then, on the 18th of January, 749 of the Common Era, an earthquake came. It broke most of the eastern Mediterranean. Jerash was one of the cities it finished. The survivors walked away. Sand blew over the forum. The columns fell or stayed standing. The Crusaders described the place as empty. It stayed empty for more than 1,000 years. A German traveler named Ulrich Jasper Seetzen recognized the ruins in 1806. Excavation began in the 1920s. It has not stopped since. Jerash endures because of what buried it. The sand preserved what time would have erased. South of Amman, the road climbs up to the spine of the Jordan Plateau. The land becomes rocky, terraced, thin-soiled. Olive trees, almond trees, juniper. You are driving along the edge of the Great Rift Valley, a tear in the Earth's crust that runs from Syria all the way down to Mozambique. And then the land falls away. The place is called Dana. It is Jordan's largest nature reserve, 320 square kilometers, and it contains something no other reserve in the country contains: 4 separate biogeographical zones meeting in a single valley. Mediterranean vegetation at the top where the plateau catches rain. Irano-Turanian steppe on the middle slopes. Saharo-Arabian desert as the valley falls. And finally at the bottom, a thin band of Sudanian penetration. Plants that belong to equatorial Africa and should not be here at all. 800 plant species live in this valley. 3 of them are new to science. 450 animal species, 25 of them endangered. The reserve protects the Nubian ibex. Watch one at dawn, feeding on a ledge of limestone that should be impossible to stand on. Its hooves are soft in the center and hard on the rim. They grip stone like a climbing shoe. It eats by tearing at thorny acacia the way a goat tears at washing on a line. A male's horns curve back nearly a meter. When 2 males fight in the rut, they rear on their hind legs. They come down on each other's skulls with the full weight of a small motorcycle. There are fewer than 1,200 wild Nubian ibex left in Jordan. Dana holds most of them. The Atata tribe has lived in these canyons for roughly 400 years. Their stone houses are built into the walls of the valley. The reserve pays them to guide, to craft, to stay. This is the model Jordan has had to build. Conservation that includes the people who were already there. From Dana, the land keeps falling. You cross the ridgeline. You descend through switchbacks. The temperature rises, the vegetation thins, your ears pop, and then the salt begins. The Dead Sea lies 439 meters below sea level. It is the lowest exposed land on Earth. Its water is almost 10 times as salty as the ocean. Walk into it, and you cannot sink. Your legs rise to the surface on their own. The brine burns any cut on your skin. It stings your eyes if you splash. It coats your hair like oil. The Dead Sea is dying. In 1960, the lake was 50 miles long. Today, it is 30 miles long. It is dropping by roughly 1 meter every year. The shoreline retreats before your eyes. On the far side, the Ain Gedi Resort was built on the shore in the 1990s. The shore is now 2 kilometers from the resort. The cause is not climate, or not only climate. In the 1960s, Israel built a pumping station on the Jordan River and diverted most of the flow north into the national water carrier. Jordan and Syria then diverted the Yarmouk, the Jordan's main tributary. The Dead Sea used to receive about 1.3 billion cubic meters of fresh water a year. Today, it receives less than 100 million. On the Jordanian side, potash works pump water out and evaporate it for fertilizer. The industry is called the Arab Potash Company. Its evaporation ponds at the southern end of the sea are enormous. From above, they are the shape of a chessboard. Each pond holds dead sea water that sits in the sun for months. The water grows saltier, then precipitates out as crystals of potash, bromine, and magnesium chloride. The minerals are shipped to farms as far as Brazil and China. In the shallows along the Jordanian shore, the mud itself is an industry. It is black, sulfuric, and heavy with minerals. Tourists pay to be coated in it. The spas are built into the sides of hills that used to be the shore. The sea moves farther away every year, and the spas, year by year, extend longer walkways. Where the water used to be, the ground is now hollow. Salt deposits dissolve underground as the freshwater table drops. The earth collapses without warning. These are the sinkholes. There are now more than 1,000 of them along the shore. They swallow roads, they swallow date palms, they swallow fields. Scientists who study the lake agree that the decline cannot be reversed within the next century. They do not agree on whether it can be stabilized at all. The river that was supposed to feed the lake is now a trickle. In 1950, the Jordan River ran roaring out of the Sea of Galilee. Today, it is less than 10% of what it was. In places, it is a muddy ditch. Near its mouth, downstream of the Israeli diversion dams, it becomes sewage and agricultural runoff. But the river valley is still alive. It is the lowest inhabited valley on Earth, stretched between desert and sea, warm in winter, furnace hot in summer. Date palms, citrus, banana plantations, Bedouin tents among the groves. And overhead sometimes, the great birds, griffon vultures, wingspan nearly 3 meters. They ride the thermals that rise off the rift walls. They are carrion birds. They do not kill, they clean. When something dies in the desert, the griffons find it within hours. They can smell nothing, they only see. A single vulture flying at altitude can spot an incident 5 kilometers away. If one descends, others notice within seconds. A dozen birds may arrive at the same carcass from valleys far apart, each one tracking the next. The Jordan Rift is one of the largest raptor migration corridors in the world. 500,000 birds pass through every spring and autumn. Eagles, buzzards, harriers, and the great vultures moving between Europe and Africa on invisible elevators of warm air. This too is what Jordan is: a bottleneck, a passage, a place almost everything moves through. The road south from the Dead Sea climbs out of the rift and back onto the plateau. The cities thin. The settlements become villages, then hamlets, then nothing. This is the Hizma, a desert of sandstone mountains rising out of a sea of red sand.
It is the kingdom's largest valley.
Its Arabic name is Wadi Rum. The Bedouin call it Wadi Rum. 720 square kilometres of desert floor, surrounded by cliffs that rise 1,000 meters on either side. The Bedouin who live here call it the Valley of the Moon. Thomas Edward Lawrence, a British Army officer passing through in 1917, called it vast, echoing, and godlike. 7 Bedouin tribes live in Wadi Rum. The largest is the Zalabia. The most famous, in the pages of European history, is the Hawaitat. They are the descendants of camel herders. They are also, in living memory, the descendants of warriors. In 1916, Sharif Hussein of Mecca declared revolt against the Ottoman Empire. His sons led the fighting. Faisal was the commander in the field. Abdullah, his older brother, would later become the first king of Jordan. A young British officer named Lawrence rode out from Cairo to serve as liaison. Lawrence spoke Arabic. He had studied archaeology in Syria before the war. He understood what the empire did not. The Bedouin would not be led. They could only be joined. He came into Wadi Rum in the spring of 1917. The Hawaitat received him. Their chief at the time was a man named Auda Abu Tayyi. Lawrence, who wrote the account that would shape how Europe remembered the revolt, called him the greatest fighting man in northern Arabia. He was older than Lawrence by decades. He had been wounded in raids across half a century. He had killed, by his own count, 75 men in tribal combat. In his own telling, he had lost count of camels stolen. Auda agreed to join the revolt, not because Lawrence asked, not because the Sharif commanded. He joined because it suited the Hawaitat, because the Turks had insulted them for years, because the moment had come when insult could be answered. On the 6th of July, 1917, a column of roughly 600 Hawaitat riders came down out of the Wadi Rum hills at the back of the Ottoman garrison at Aqaba. The town was defended on the seaside. The desert side was considered impassable for an army. Auda led the charge himself. Lawrence was somewhere behind him, trying to keep up. The battle was over in less than an hour. The Turks surrendered. Aqaba fell. The southern coast of what is now Jordan belonged to the revolt. Aqaba today is a small city on the Red Sea, Jordan's only coastline. 27 kilometers of beach. On a clear day from the northern Corniche, you can see 4 countries: Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel, all meeting at the Gulf. Fishing boats, container ships, a duty-free zone, coral reefs, some of the best preserved in the region because the current is weak and the Gulf is narrow. Beneath the waters are 5 wrecks deliberately sunk for divers. Above the water, cafes selling grilled fish and tamarind juice. Past the southern edge of the city, a Corniche road climbs a cliff where a flag flies. The flag is enormous, 60 meters by 40 meters. The flag is the flag of the Arab Revolt. Black, green, white, and red. The colors of the 4 caliphates. It is raised here because Aqaba is where the revolt became serious. It is where the Hawaitat came down out of the hills. It is where, in a sense, Jordan began. The desert that Outer came down out of is still there. Wadi Rum today is a protected area. The Bedouin who guided Lawrence still live in it. Their grandchildren still live in it. They run the jeep tours now, and the camel walks, and the desert camps where visitors sleep in canvas tents under stars so thick the sky looks like paint. The tribes have changed less than you would expect. The Zalabia still graze goats. The Hawaitat still marry within their clans. The old alliances still matter. A Bedouin guide will tell you which camp belongs to which family, which wells have which water rights, which canyons you can enter and which you cannot. A boy of 12 will drive a Toyota pickup across the sand at 40 kilometers an hour and know where every soft patch is by touch. He learned the desert the way his grandfather learned the desert, except with a truck instead of a camel. In the evening, when the fire is lit and the sun is gone, the coffee pot comes out. The Bedouin coffee is its own ceremony. The green beans are roasted in an iron pan over coals. The roasting fills the tent with smoke. The beans are ground in a long wooden mortar. The sound of the pestle against the wood is considered a welcome. If you hear it from across the desert, it means coffee is being prepared and you are permitted to arrive.
The coffee is boiled with cardamom.
It is served in small, handleless cups, barely more than a mouthful. The first cup goes to the guest, the second to the host. The third is called the cup of the sword. In the old tradition, you accepted it only if you had no quarrel with the house. In most Bedouin tents today, 3 generations live together. The grandfather remembers a nomadic life. The father remembers the transition to settlement. The son lives in concrete, drives a pickup, and still knows by muscle memory how to pack a tent in 15 minutes if the weather turns. At dawn, if you walk away from the camp and sit still, you will begin to see the desert that is always underneath. Tracks in the sand from the night before, fox prints, hare, gecko, sometimes the curving trail of a sidewinder, and sometimes the prints of a camel spider. The camel spider is not a spider, it is a solifuge, an order of arachnid older than the scorpion. It can run at 16 kilometers an hour on 8 legs. It is nocturnal. Its jaws are a quarter of its body length. At twilight in Wadi Rum, near a dropped piece of meat, a small wave of them may appear out of nowhere, feeding in silence, then vanishing before the first light. Wadi Rum is full of these. The scale you see, the cliffs, the sand, the great openness, is not the only scale. There is also the scale of the beetle that rolls dew off its back to drink in the morning. The scale of the gecko that licks fog from its own eyes. A desert is not empty, it is only quiet. Between Wadi Rum and Amman, there are smaller places most visitors do not reach. At Shobak Castle, a Crusader fortress raised in 1115, the walls still stand on a hilltop above the old King's Highway. Saladin took it in 1189. The old stairway down to the water source beneath the fortress, cut in the rock, still works. At Karak, further north along the same road, another Crusader castle stands at the top of a small town. Its walls are 7 stories tall. The Mamluk Sultan Baybars expanded it in the 13th century. It was used as a prison, a fortress, and a palace by turns for 800 years. At Ma'an, a railway town in the south, the old Hejaz line still runs, or what is left of it. Lawrence and the Hawaitat blew up sections of this same track in 1917. The Ottoman trains never came through again. Some of the rails are still bent where the dynamite cracked them. At Madaba, a modest parish church holds a mosaic floor from the 6th century. It is a map, the oldest surviving map of the Holy Land. Jerusalem, as it appeared in Byzantine times, every city marked in Greek lettering made of 1 centimetre tesserae. At Mount Nebo, a stone marks the place where Moses is said to have looked across to a land he would not enter. On a clear morning, you can see Jericho, the Dead Sea, and the lights of Jerusalem. Moses died there, according to the text, and was buried in a valley no one has found. At Qais, in the far north, the ruins of the Roman city of Gadara look out across the Sea of Galilee into modern Israel and the Golan Heights of modern Syria. A basalt theatre, a colonnaded main street, olive trees pressing in from all sides. At the Azraq oasis in the eastern desert, migrating birds once stopped in their hundreds of thousands. Cranes, flamingos, storks, ducks. The oasis was nearly drained dry in the 1980s by overpumping. Conservationists have spent 3 decades trying to bring it back. It is a fraction of what it was, and it is still beautiful. And at Shalmari, not far from Azraq, in a fenced reserve of 22 square kilometres, the Arabian oryx was brought back from extinction. The oryx is a white desert antelope with long, straight horns. In profile, the 2 horns can look like one. That may be how the unicorn legend began. By the 1970s, hunted by men in jeeps with rifles, it was gone from the wild. 7 animals survived in captivity, 6 in a zoo in Arizona, 1 in Qatar. From those 7 came the breeding programs. The first oryx were released back into Jordan in 1978. There are roughly 180 living wild in Shalmari today. Elsewhere in the Arabian Peninsula, there are more. The species is no longer extinct. This is one of the few such sentences that can still be said. In the north of Jordan, near the Syrian border, there is a different kind of place. It was empty desert in early 2012. On the 28th of July, 2012, 450 Syrians crossed the border at night. By sunrise, they were in tents. The tents were called Zatari. They were meant to last a few months. By the end of 2013, Zatari held 120,000 people. It was, for a year, the 4th largest city in Jordan. Today it holds about 50,000. The tents became metal caravans. The caravans aged, cracked, lost their roofs. More than 70% of the shelters now need urgent repair. A solar power plant opened in 2017. Streets have names. More than 20,000 Syrian children have been born inside the camp. The main street of Zatari is 3 kilometres long. The residents call it the Champs-Élysées. There are roughly 3,000 shops along it, all run by refugees, barbers, tailors, bakeries selling Syrian flatbread, shops selling bridal dresses in plastic packaging. A refugee in Zatari married another refugee in Zatari, and somebody had to sell the dress. A butcher in one stall sells chicken from a freezer powered by the solar plant. A small boy stands outside selling falafel from a cart. He was born here. He has never been to Syria. His grandmother, inside the caravan behind him, remembers the town she left. The grandson has heard her describe it so many times he thinks he remembers it too. Most were too young when they arrived to remember the country they came from. Many have never been outside the camp. Jordan, a country without oil, without significant water, has taken in roughly 675,000 registered Syrian refugees. Unregistered, the number is more than 1 million. The World Bank calculates the cost at nearly $1 billion a year. There is no exit for most of them. Syria is not safe. Third country resettlement has slowed. The camp is not temporary. The camp is where most of these children will grow up. This is the arithmetic of a small country in a bad neighborhood. Jordan does not ask whether it has the capacity. The refugees are already at the border, and the border opens. To understand why the border opens, you have to understand the family that built this country. The Hashemites claim descent from the Prophet Muhammad through his daughter Fatima. They ruled Mecca for roughly 7 centuries as sharifs, as guardians of the holy sites. In 1916, Sharif Hussein of Mecca led the Arab Revolt. After the war, the British divided his promised kingdom into pieces. His sons got the pieces. Abdullah, the second son, arrived in Amman on the 2nd of March 1921 with 2,000 men. Transjordan had no infrastructure, no treasury, no central government. He built one. He governed for 30 years. He turned a scattered tribal society into a functioning kingdom. He achieved full independence from Britain in 1946. The 20th of July, 1951. Friday prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. King Abdullah enters the mosque with his 15-year-old grandson, Hussein. A young Palestinian tailor's apprentice steps out of the crowd. He fires 3 shots. Abdullah falls. The tailor turns the pistol on the boy. A bullet hits the medal pinned to Hussein's chest, a medal his grandfather had given him that morning. It deflects. The grandson lives. He will be crowned King Hussein at 18. He will rule for 46 years. He will be succeeded by his son, the current King Abdullah II. King Hussein's reign became the long apprenticeship of the kingdom. He survived at least a dozen assassination attempts. He managed the loss of the West Bank to Israel in 1967. He made the peace with Israel in 1994, the second Arab state to do so. He died of cancer in 1999, and the country, without exaggeration, mourned for 40 days. The assassination is not hidden in Jordan. It is foundational. The country remembers that its king died at prayer in a Palestinian mosque, and that his heir survived by accident. Every decision the Hashemite dynasty has made since has been shaped by what that moment meant. The country has known dark hours since. In September 1970, civil war broke between the Jordanian army and Palestinian militias operating inside the kingdom. Thousands died. Palestinians call it Black September. The king prevailed. The militias were expelled. The country did not fracture. It almost did. It has almost done so many times, but it has not. There is a reason the documentary returns to Petra at the end. Not because it is the most famous place in Jordan, though it is. Not because it is the most beautiful, though it may be. Because the Nabataeans understood something that the country itself still depends on. They understood how to survive in a place that should not be survivable.
To reach Petra,
You approach from the town of Wadi Musa, the Valley of Moses. The spring that feeds the town is called Ain Musa. Tradition says Moses struck a rock here and water came out. Archaeology suggests the spring has been used for at least 3,000 years. You pay your entry. You walk through a hot, open stretch of gravel. You pass rock-cut tombs on either side, some simple, some elaborate, some with facades worn almost flat by sand. These are the Jinn blocks, the tombs of the early Nabataean merchants, carved before the architecture became grand. Then the ground narrows, the cliffs close in on either side, and you enter the Seek. The Seek is not a canyon. Canyons are cut by water over long time. The Seek was cut by a fault in the earth. The sandstone tore cleanly in two. On either side, the walls rise to 180 meters. At some points, the gap is 3 meters wide. At other points, it is almost closed. You walk for 1¼ kilometers. The rock is red, rose, ochre, violet, where the iron in the sandstone changes. The walls have been dressed with niches, small altars to forgotten gods, faded reliefs of camel drivers, eroded inscriptions in Nabataean Aramaic, a script almost no one on earth can now read. And on either side of the floor, cut into the living rock, run 2 channels. They are narrow and shallow, one on the left, one on the right. They look like drainage. They are drainage, and they are the single most important feature in the entire city. The Nabataeans cut these channels roughly 2,000 years ago. The left channel ran drinking water from the spring at Ain Musa, carried through clay pipes of terracotta into cisterns inside the city. The right channel caught the winter rains that fell on the plateau above. Every drop that fell on the Seek was rooted, collected, settled, purified, stored. Petra averages about 15 centimetres of rain a year. The Nabataeans made it enough for 30,000 people. Their pipes were a marvel of engineering. The Nabataeans could not have written them down. They did not have the mathematics we use today, but they found the right angles by trial and error across 2 centuries of experiments. Modern fluid dynamics analysis has shown something remarkable. The angles they chose, precisely 2 degrees along some sections, 4 degrees along others, are the exact angles that maximize flow in an open channel clay pipe of that diameter. A deviation of 1 degree in either direction would cause cavitation and leakage. Their city had particle-settling basins. The water came in one end of a stone tank. The sand in it sank to the bottom. The clean water flowed out the other end. It was the first known water purification system of its kind in the ancient Near East. They had flood control dams. The Wadi Musa basin, when a storm broke, could send a wall of water through the Seek that would drown anyone standing in it. The Nabataeans built a diversion dam at the mouth of the Seek. It sent the floodwater around the city through a tunnel cut through solid rock. The tunnel is still there. In the rainy season, it still works. 200 kilometers of clay pipes, hundreds of underground cisterns, dams, tunnels, aqueducts, an entire hydrological engineering tradition developed in secret over 2 centuries by a people whose history books we barely have. The Nabataean kingdom at its peak stretched from the Hejaz in modern Saudi Arabia up to Damascus. It was not large on a map, but it controlled the water in every desert it touched, and the desert, for the traders, was most of the world. Caravans of 1,000 camels moved under Nabataean protection. The protection was not military, It was logistical. The Nabataeans knew where the water was because they had put it there. They kept most of this secret. They wrote in their own script, a flowing version of Aramaic that scholars still struggle with. They did not leave grand monuments to their kings. They did not commission long royal inscriptions. They wrote on the cliffs and called it enough. Their cities outside Petra, Bosra, Hegra, Avdat, Mamshit, followed the same principle. Carve into the rock, hide the water, tax the caravans, survive. And the whole of that effort was aimed at one thing: to make it possible to live in great numbers in a place where nothing should live. The walking continues. You are in the Sikh for 20 minutes, 30 minutes if you are slow. You can hear nothing but your own footsteps and the voices of other visitors. The light is dim. The walls grow taller. And then, through a narrow slit in the rock ahead of you, you begin to see something that is not rock. A column, pink, fluted, 40 meters tall. You step forward. The slit widens.
Al-Khazneh.
The treasury. Carved directly into the cliff at the end of the Sikh, 40 meters tall, 25 meters wide. Corinthian columns, a broken pediment, sculpted urns, lions, griffins, and above them all, an eagle half eroded by the wind. No one built this. It was cut out of the rock. The workers began at the top. They did not have scaffolding. They worked down from a flat face that had been dressed smooth at some cost in lives. They carved the facade first, backwards, capital, then column, then base. Then they hollowed out the chambers behind it. When they were done, they did not stop. They kept going, through the mountain, into other chambers. The treasury is a tomb. The elaborate building is the marker, the monument. The body itself, whoever it was, lay in the stone behind the false door at the back. Burckhardt stood where you are standing, on the 22nd of August, 1812. He could not take notes. He could not sketch. He could not stay. Every instinct told him the Bedouin watching from above had already decided he was a treasure hunter. He had to keep walking. He walked past the treasury, up the outer Sikh, past the 6,000-seat Roman theatre that the Nabataeans had cut into a hillside of tombs. He passed the facades of the royal tombs, the urn tomb, the Corinthian, the palace. He looked out across the valley and saw, on the far side, the colonnaded street, the market, the temple ruins, the houses. He saw a city, carved, dug, settled, hidden in plain sight for 6 centuries. He understood what he was looking at, and he kept walking because he did not want to die. On the 22nd of August, 1817, 5 years to the day after he entered the Sikh, Burckhardt died of dysentery in Cairo. He was 32. He had never returned to Petra. He had never published the account of his discovery. His friend in London edited the journals. The journals are now in the library at the University of Cambridge. You can read what he wrote that day. The Nabataean city held 30,000 people when Augustus was emperor in Rome. They grew grapes. They pressed wine. They traded frankincense and kept records in Greek, Aramaic, and their own script. They worshipped gods called Dushara and Al-Uzza, the mountain and the morning star. They buried their dead in the rock so that no wind, no flood, no sacking army could destroy the graves. They were absorbed into Rome in 106 of the Common Era without a battle. Roman governors ruled from Petra for 2 centuries. Then, In 363 of the Common Era, the earthquake came. It broke the water system, the dams cracked, the pipes separated, the cisterns lost their seals. In a dry city, the loss of water is the loss of everything. The trade routes shifted to the Red Sea. The population emptied out, family by family, over 2 centuries. By the time the Muslim armies arrived, Petra was a small town. By the time of the Crusades, it was a hermit's cave, and then it was gone. The stone held what the people could not. This is the empire carved entirely into stone, not built on top of the land, but cut into it, not raised, but hollowed, not made to last, made to be impossible to remove. Everything the Nabataeans built above ground has been taken by earthquake, wind, or time. Only what they cut into the cliffs remains, and what remains is enough to fill a city. Jordan has been learning the Nabataean lesson for a very long time. The country sits between powers that have repeatedly decided to fight across its land. Every wave of Middle Eastern violence has broken over it. Jordan is the only country on earth bordering Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the West Bank, and Egypt across the Red Sea. Everything that has happened in those countries in the last 70 years has arrived at Jordan's border as people, wounded, hungry, angry, grieving, needing a place to sleep. Jordan has let them in. It has done this without oil wealth, without significant water, without the strategic depth that larger countries use to absorb shock. It has done this by keeping the stone that already exists. The Roman theatre at Amman is still used for concerts. The Umayyad Palace on the hill above is still walked through. The mosaic map at Madaba is still in a working church. The Bedouin in Wadi Rum still know where the wells are. The ibex in Dana still drink at dawn. What a country chooses to keep when it cannot afford to build tells you what that country is. Jordan keeps the water. It keeps the old stones. It keeps the borders open to people with nowhere else to go. It keeps the crown on the grandson of a king who died at prayer in Jerusalem. The pressure on the country is not easing. The water table under the capital is dropping by roughly 1 meter a year. The Amman Zaka aquifer, which supplies most of the drinking water for the north, will be commercially exhausted within a generation. The Red Dead pipeline, a proposed desalination line from the Gulf of Aqaba, has been planned for 20 years and repeatedly abandoned. Jordan's new plan is simpler: desalinate at Aqaba and pump the water 300 kilometers north, uphill, against the slope of the rift. The engineering is difficult. The country will do it anyway. The Dead Sea is not being saved. The Jordan River is not being restored. The Syrian children born in Zatari will not, most of them, return to Syria. The water table under Azraq is still dropping. These are the unresolved facts. They are not softened by hope. They are the conditions under which the country continues. And still, every morning, a Bedouin guide starts a fire in Wadi Rum. A boy in Amman runs a tray of coffee between shops in the souk. A goat eats thorns on a cliff in Dana. A line of tourists walks down the Sikh and stops at the bend because they have seen the column. The Nabataeans understood that nothing built on the surface of this land would last. They carved their capital into the stone beneath, and it did. Jordan is still carving. Thank you for spending this hour in Jordan. If you enjoyed this quiet walk through the kingdom, the red sandstone, the ruined colonnades, the desert cliffs, the city carved into the mountain, we have other journeys waiting for you. Places where the story is hidden behind what everyone thinks they already know. Subscribe to Where on Earth. Like the video if it helped you see a small country with new eyes. Leave a comment below telling us which place in Jordan you would walk to first. We will see you in the next documentary.